times I watch on a lot of things on the internet or on television, and I see these pastors that don't quite look like me or talk like me or act like me. Sometimes I visit meetings and have breakfast with some of them as well, and I like them. They're good people. I sat the other day in a Dunkin' Donuts in Lebanon getting some work done to get out of the office, and for about an hour I eavesdropped on a conversation of two guys who obviously worked for the church, and I couldn't help but admire how well they were dressed and how exciting some of their ministries seemed to be, and all the work they were doing and the buildings they were talking about and the crowds they were experiencing. But I sat there in dirty jeans, stained from doing something around here before that, and a t-shirt, and my Carhartt hat, and my coffee, and my broken, cracked computer, and I realized that I'm just not like that. I'm not here to be a motivational speaker, which honestly, I think some of them kind of lean towards that rather than what we do here, but not all. I'm not here to wear $200 shoes, unless they're hiking boots from LL Bean that I've been saving for. I'm not certainly ever going to wear skinny jeans and appear to have walked off the cover of a J. Crew catalog for the trendy clergy of today. I refuse to be a part of a church that has a lighting system that costs more than the average member makes in a year. God did not call me into ministry to talk about all the rainbows and unicorns that will magically come your way at the moment of your salvation. How if you just simply pray, all will be okay and God will check you off a list like Santa Claus does and grant you some gifts under a tree. You see, Santa and unicorns, they have something in common. And they're not the gospel. That's not the life of Jesus. Jesus did not fix all the world's problems. Jesus didn't wave the magic wand that I wish I had as well. Those he called close to him didn't live a life of great prosperity and blessing. They lived a life of sacrifice and love and strife. Sure, we are all blessed with what we have, and we should be thankful for that. And we can be and should try to live in a world of financial justice and security for all, including ourselves. It's good to seek and work for those things for others and, yes, for us. But I, for one, don't buy into God blessing a church with a giant, huge, expansive facility while churchgoers sit there on a Sunday morning knowingly letting children suffer in their community. And believe it or not, there are children who suffer in our community. Jesus is God coming to the earth to be broken with us, to be broken for us, to show us how to right the wrongs, to show us how to reach into the shadows, and to love at all cost, even in our brokenness. I'm sorry, but for me, Jesus is your Savior, not your cosmic wish granter standing at the gateway to financial abundance and emotional utopia and disease-free lives. Because we receive grace, even in our brokenness, we can and we should be compelled to offer that grace to others. We should be joyous in the blessings of our spirit and the gift of grace from God. We should share the good news, especially with the poor and most definitely with the wealthy as all. We should also speak what many say is truth to power, as our Quaker friends coined in the 1950s. We should say the tough things and fight the good fight, even though it may cost us. And so today, I speak about my sermon, or in my sermon, about things that I know may cost me. Things that I know may offend some friends or some people I care deeply about. But I also know that I'm talking about the gospel of Jesus and not about unicorns. I'm talking mostly today to the men, but it's important for women to listen as well, because Somehow you are connected to a man or boy in your life, whether they are your husband or brother or father, a son or a friend. You also can influence and spread the message that we're going to speak about today. I believe it's time that we begin to rethink a few things about manhood and what being a man is, and you're going to hear me speak a lot about that in the coming months and maybe even all the years of my ministry from time to time. We use this phrase, sometimes a phrase in our society, about earning your man card or revoking it. Usually is when we hear about it, when one guy says to another, dude, you just lost your man card, or for something he may have done. Often it's associated with things we consider to be masculine qualities. You might earn your man card by chopping a pile of wood or growing a long beard or killing the biggest deer of the season, and you might lose it by trying to impress a girlfriend and going to get a pedicure with her, which I have not done, but I've been tempted to do because, well, she's a girl and that's power enough for me. But I've been threatened with losing my man card if I ever do it, so I have not yet done it. Some things are more influential maybe than they should be. But let's look at this example of Joseph, who God chose to be his earthly father. The man God chose to teach him skills, to show him how to treat others, especially women, to protect him from bullies and from nature and weather, to provide for him. Joseph, I feel, as I said to the kids, is often overlooked this time of year. The truth is, we aren't told a ton about him, and certainly as far as parenting goes, Mary takes the center stage early on and remains there. Perhaps this has been influenced our culture a lot over time and across cultures about the roles of mothers and fathers. And I want you to know that today I'm not speaking about Joseph purely as the immediate father or earthly father of Jesus, but a male influence in his life. We all have coached, or will be grandfathers or uncles or neighbors to children in our life, and we all can learn a lot from Joseph. I mean, imagine, if you will, today, one of your friends coming to you and saying, well, Mary and I are engaged. They call it a betrothal at the time, or that's another word we use, which is actually more serious than an engagement even. And Mary's pregnant. Yet, I'm a righteous guy, so nothing has occurred yet that would have caused Mary to be pregnant, other than Mary's telling me the Holy Spirit put that child there. Every single person in this room has to admit that if your friend told you that, you would be having a long, serious talk with him, or Mary would be a very short one. And you wouldn't have the faith to accept that. And then Joseph goes and listens to the Holy Spirit. He thinks about running out on Mary, or sending her away, actually, because that's how it was set up. But he at least was thinking about it to do it quietly so that the public would know. That's kind of a bonus point for him. But yet he does even more, and he stays with her. He listens to God's voice, not to the laws of his friends, or not for the sake of losing his man card. And most definitely, though that didn't exist at the time, Joseph didn't spout off or run off at the mouth about Mary on Facebook or any other place where we see so many people share news in their life that perhaps they might have waited a day or two to share, or maybe never at all, with the rest of us. Joseph does exactly what the angel tells him to do, even though the rest of society would have told him to do the opposite. Oftentimes, I think, as men, including myself, I'm as guilty as anyone else, I don't do that. And I worry about the image I have, and having to meet that image in our community or wherever else, and doing things without really listening actually to what the gospel is telling me to do. He listens to God, not to the cultural influences or thoughts of those around him. He didn't do what most of us would have done. He did the exact opposite. And like Peter and Paul, there's a lot about that narrative of Joseph that really interests me. In our own world, we are facing an evil greater than you might realize if we were to skip now 2,000 and some years ahead. It's easy for us to see the obvious evils, murder and theft and racism, oppression, things we see blasted at the news of what we can fight and correct and send an army off to do for us. I think we fight those evils, but we at least recognize them whether we fight them or not or work against them. But I believe there's a fear, or I'm afraid of an evil that is even greater than those obvious things. Perhaps it's even more damaging. And that is the indifference of good men and of women, of course. That is the willingness of people to do nothing when they know there's a problem. That evil or that laziness or that inaction is worse than the obvious ones because it allows things to continue generation to generation without being corrected. I'm asking you today to take a hard look at Joseph and how he changed things that needed to be changed at the time. He didn't do what he had the right to do to Mary. He didn't take the easy way out, and he most certainly probably was judged by those around him. In fact, if we skip ahead a little bit, and 2 years after Jesus' birth, he's going to be on the run again because of a king sending people out to murder, specifically his child, but they go after every child they can of that same age. Joseph was quite a guy. He wasn't like anyone I know, to be honest, including myself, and God had picked him for a reason. In our country, 1 in 4 women will be abused by an intimate partner in their life. 1 in 6 women will experience rape in their life. 80% of those who are raped will be raped by someone they know. This year, 15 million children will be abused in the United States, and hundreds of them live right here in our county. Those are facts. Those are documented statistics. We can't deny them as we would do or want to do, which is easy. We have to own up to them. 1 in 4 women will be abused by an intimate partner in their life. 1 in 6 women will have experienced rape. We're all pretty smart people. We don't have to do the math on that. Whether you know it or not, someone you know is the 1 in 4 or the 1 in 6. Maybe more than one person you know. Whether we know it or not, someone in this room has been abused by someone in their life who they love dearly. There are abused women and children in our community. They're right here, in our community. That's according to the numbers. Now, that's just the things that are reported. What about all those who go unreported? Here's where I think us guys come in, because the problem is we often consider this a women's issue. Girls go to classes and are taught how to protect themselves, how to report things, how to be mindful of how they dress so as to not attract certain behavior from men, and it's even funded as a women's health issue as well. But the reality is, the fact is that this is an issue with men, not with women. This is an issue that we guys ought to be policing ourselves. It's time for us, even us good guys, all sitting in this room, to start watching our mouths and policing our thoughts. To stop making the jokes around our buddies, not because, and I've been there, just as all of us have, not because it's harmless. Well, we say that we know we're not going to do anything to a young girl or a wife or comment to someone, and we wouldn't want anyone to ever say that around our daughter, but the reality is you don't know the life your buddy lives in private, or what he might teach his son or retell that story or joke to, and how that affects a young boy and how he'll treat girls as he grows up. The smallest, simplest things can lead to this behavior. Now, I'm a realist, and we're not going to do away with these things. They're not going to go away. But we should do something. We shouldn't just say, well, that happens in closed doors or to other people and not to us, because the reality is, you know someone this has happened to, whether you're aware of it or not. And the truth is that men typically have done very little to fix this problem or do anything about it. We have not gone against the rules of our time and our society like Joseph did. We haven't been willing to stand up and say the tough things to keep this from happening. Now, some of you have heard me say some of those things, so you know I'm not too afraid to say that, especially because I've always been very close to women in my life, whether it was my grandmothers or my own mother or aunts or my daughter, friends of mine. I've always been kind of protective of girls, and the truth is, when people say, oh, that's just how they talk in a locker room, I do get to stand on a pedestal a little bit, because I have never talked that way about a girl in a locker room. If you're in a locker room talking that way, it might explain why you're losing your games and not winning them. Because in a locker room, you should be talking about the sport you're playing or the practice you're preparing for, not those things that we pass off as unhurtful, even though they are. Now, again, I'm not here to cast judgment on any one individual, because it's something that as men we all have seen or witnessed or taken part in. And it's something that lots of good men have done. I'm not here to say that someone who's made those mistakes, or even someone who's abused a woman, is outside the reach of God's love and being a good man again. But what I am here to say is that it's time we start to police ourselves a little bit more and consider this a men's issue, not a woman's issue. To consider this a Joseph type of ministry in a way. We should start watching what we are watching on TV around our kids. And we should maybe not avoid it, but at least talk to our sons and daughters about it when we see it. Because the truth is, they're going to go out into the world outside of our homes. And we should equip them with the tools to keep themselves safe, to keep others safe, and most importantly, to not do harm to anyone else either. I believe it's time that in our community and even beyond, we become the church in general, not just our church, but the entire church, the universal church, become part of the conversation and the action towards protecting our own community, our neighbors, and our loved ones. I'm not asking anyone to do vigilante-style things or put yourself at risk, but I am asking you to begin to rethink some things that you might say or joke about, to begin to have some tough conversations with your daughters, but today, even more importantly, realize that you need to have those conversations with your sons as well about what they should and should not say. That some things really aren't okay. The truth is, if I were to tell you those numbers again, the 1 in 4 and the 1 in 6, it may not mean as much because it sounds so far away, but I can personally tell you that I can't remember. I would say it's probably around a dozen or so times that I've heard in my life a woman tell me that a man has held a gun to her head. Well, for some of them, it's someone they're still married to. For others, it's someone who they have children with. For some, it was their father. Some children have shared with me that they watched their dad do it to their mom. And it's not okay by me. I've heard moms say, well, they don't remember because they were about 4 years old when it happened, and their 40-year-old son does remember, and it's caused him great damage. So when those things do happen, you got to go to the professionals, and you got to get help. You have to. Kids are resilient, but unless you've ever had a gun held to your head, you don't understand that you have to talk to someone about that after it happens. More than likely, if I've known 12 people just to tell me that in my life, A lot of you in here have probably heard that story as well. Now there's a lot of judgment we can do on those situations, on the woman or the man, or why don't you leave? But that's not this conversation. The conversation is when it happens, we need to stop it from happening again. We need to be open to getting those people help, and we need to make sure that our sons are being raised in a way that they know to never do that. I'm not perfect, but I am willing to make a change. I am willing to watch the jokes I make or the comments I make. I'm willing to actually speak up to people in my life when they do that. You see, for me, it's not that hard, though, because nowadays my friends who used to curse like sailors around me tend to let something slip and then apologize because of my current job, which is good. Maybe, my presence might help them stop from saying certain things, but the reality is I still say a few words every now and then when I'm upset or joking with my friends, and that doesn't separate me from God any more than it does someone else. This isn't something just to talk about here on a Sunday and to think about and feel bad about. It is something that we need to leave the walls of our church with. Some of you will and others won't. You'll find other things to do for Jesus, and that's good. But there's a speaker who has a good quote I'd like to share with you, Tony Campolo. He's pretty well known in Christian speaking circles, and I've had to listen to him several times for classes. He made some observation that I think is really important. If you've been with me long enough, you'll know that one of my first sermons I said about we need to be ready for people to come in the doors and accept anyone who walks in, and that's true, and we have. But the reality is that Jesus never says to the poor, come and find the church. He says to those of us in the church, go into the world and find the poor, the hungry, the homeless, and imprisoned, and help them. Those are the words of Tony Campolo. I'd like to say that again because we get caught up in how important it is to be here on Sunday, yet we're Christians 7 days of the week. Jesus never says to the poor, go and find a church. He says to those of us in the church, go into the world and find the poor, the hungry, the homeless, and imprisoned. We must take our thoughts and our beliefs that we feel here in church, as tough as it can be, and we must translate them into action. Jesus didn't come to teach us so that light bulbs would go off in our head and we'd say, oh, now I get it, and that would be the end of it. That's not enough to just understand or to get it. He came to us, not to have light bulbs go off in our head, but so that we could energize the world and to distribute that energy, that love of His to others. That we would take what we learn here on a Sunday or in Bible studies or in our own research, and that we would use it, and that we would give that to others. You see, that's how you earn a man card, not by being the best carpenter, but by teaching someone else how to be a carpenter, in my book. Not by proving what you can do, but by showing what God has done for you. Not by seeing your own worth and value, but by showing others that they too are worthy, no matter their situation in life. That, in my mind, is the work of Joseph. And in my mind, it's the work of all of us, but in these times, especially those of us who like to think we have earned our man card. Amen. Please join me now.